Back with us on America's Forum, J.D. Hayworth, John Bogman, rejoined by Morgan Thompson. Morgan, earlier in our broadcast, you talked about what was transpiring in Washington State, and now we're pleased to have a guest from the area covering that story.
That's right. Jon Repp is with Como Radio, based out of Seattle. John is joining us right now. John, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, no problem.
All right, so we've been taking a look at this situation, the latest numbers that we have, and correct us here if there's an update to this. 176 still reported missing, 14 deaths. Give us the latest update on the search and rescue or search and recovery operation at this hour.
Well, I appreciate how you phrased that, and those that high number of reports there. Those are reports. There are probably some duplicates. In fact, that is for sure. And they are expecting that number to go down, but they still don't have a firm number there. It is, at this point, transitioning into a recovery effort, although they did clarify. They said, hey, look, we understand the odds are not good, but we are not giving up. We've seen this happen in the past, some unbelievable stories of survival, and so they're hoping for another such story like that. But it doesn't sound good. You have a mile of debris. It is 50 feet deep in some places. You have a mortuary team that has been brought in. The National Guard search and extraction team is arriving on the scene soon. So you have a lot more as far as resources that are on the ground. But this is really, really tough. You have this slurry that is there that has been described as too thin to walk on, too thick to take a boat through, and just unbelievable devastation there.
Now, you mentioned that the backup search and rescue people from FEMA have not arrived yet. How about the National Guard, the reinforcements? Have they arrived yet?
This is kind of a process of arriving. They should be arriving, from what I understand, a little bit later on today. FEMA is in place, but this is just kind of setting up the groundwork for this because, from what I understand, FEMA can't really move in and take over until after the rescue effort has officially ended. So, and to compound this, the rain is back in the forecast again. So that's certainly going to hamper things as far as trying to make any sort of rescue and even a recovery effort at this point.
Now, John, what about reports that the engineers knew about these dangers years or even decades ago? Can you report on that?
Well, yeah, we've had a couple of geologists who have said, hey, look, this area is prone to slides. In fact, there was a slide back in 2006, this exact same area. It was a partial collapse of a hillside. There was some mitigation work done. There were some drains that were installed. But there are a lot of questions now about who knew what, why there were buildings that were allowed to be built there, because you have a small little subdivision that was right there along the Stillaguamish River where all of this came down. And when you look at the aerial pictures of this, it is just unbelievable how much earth moved. Obviously, they were not prepared for something like this to happen.
John, the article headlining in today's Seattle Times talks about that subdivision. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure we have the chronology correct. But one of those subdivisions was what, built in 2006 after some reports, the concerns that were raised in the paper that you talked about right now. So that is something that obviously, I guess, is going to invoke scrutiny, if not public ire, if in fact there were warnings prior to that subdivision being built there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. You have a situation along a beautiful scenic river that is in a remote area that has been kind of a destination for people who just kind of want to get away from it all. But you have a history, I mean, over thousands of years even, of instability there. So it's been interesting as we've been tracking this, as you've been watching the dialogue go from the immediate rescue effort to who knew about this slide, who knew about the potential for this, and now who is going to answer for some of these buildings that were put right there. So look for this to develop further. Right now, though, the government officials are just tasked with trying to really gauge the enormity of this disaster here, to try to get crews in there, to try to get people out. But this is going to be a long process, and it's going to be an increasingly grim process.
And it is a big disaster. Now, John, you mentioned rain is in the forecast. What is the possibility of another slide occurring?
Well, the flooding situation at this point is under control. There were some initial concerns about the debris damming up the Stillaguamish River and that flood kind of growing and growing and growing. The good news, if there is any good news from all of this, is that the river has kind of been able to make its way and form new channels through the debris. The rain here is expected to hamper the efforts of the search crews, but it's not expected at this point to create another flooding situation. But it's important to note, I mean, this is still just chaos here, where you have the water backed up to an extent, but at least the flooding situation is gradually getting worked out.
Well, John, unfortunately, throughout the years, there's been policies and protocol that have been established for certain natural disasters, things like hurricanes, that maybe are a little bit more common. This seems like an unprecedented event. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but are rescue teams basically starting from scratch here, trying to come up with new ways to dig through this mud that's heard is 15 feet deep in places, and you talked about too thin to walk on, but too thick to take a boat through. Are they having to kind of rewrite the rules on how to do a search and recovery operation based on this?
I was actually trying to think of another slide of this magnitude, and I think you're right about that. I mean, where do you start? Earlier, there were concerns about even bringing in heavy equipment because the ground was shifting, and even yesterday there was some instability on the western side of this. So, and you have a road that is completely buried, again, by up to 50 feet of mud and debris. So the crews here have been cautioning that this is going to take not just days; it's going to take weeks to try and recover those who are still buried there. And they're using everything from those search dogs to the mortuary team. They're trying to ping cell phone locations. You just get a sense of the scope of this from some of these rescue workers who have come back and have said, you can imagine this, but this is greater than a lot of people are even comprehending.
Wow, that's great to get your take on this. A horrible story, of course, but always great to get someone who's been on the ground there and covered the situation. Jon Repp from KOMO News Radio out in Seattle.
We thank John for his input. Morgan, as always, we appreciate you monitoring this story for us and bringing your perspective to what transpired here. A terrible tragedy, but was outlined, the sheer magnitude of this mudslide, a lot of things that may be unprecedented, sad to say, in terms of a natural disaster and this magnitude of mudslide.
Yeah, we hope that list of missing persons comes down and the death toll does not rise as well. We'll be back with more here on America's Forum. You can always reach out to us, of course, on social media, and we'll get to some of those comments coming up here later in the show.